Coming live from the studio, this is All Sports with Gerardo. Thank you for watching another episode of All Sports. This is your host Gerardo, and all I talk is sports. On the show today, I am going to talk about the coronavirus and NFL football. Before I start the show, I hope you all had a great week. To start off with the coronavirus, the return of sports. When will leagues like the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NBA, and the NHL, when can leagues like those four leagues here in the US, or regardless of what league or sporting event it is, resume or start their season? Guess what? That is the million-dollar question that has to be answered. Also, that's not just the only million-dollar question that has to be answered. There's actually a few million-dollar questions. Some of those questions will be, when can a league like the NBA and NHL resume their season? How long are they willing to forgo this season? Is there a particular date that they have set for when they want to resume this season? Is there a particular date that they will go up to in order to start and resume this season before it overlaps into the following season? Is there a date that's going to be a cutoff date, and by time we reach that date and the season hasn't resumed, is that going to be the date that a league like the NBA and the NHL are just going to cancel the remaining of this season? We're going to have to wait and see. If that was the option that a league like the NBA and the NHL is going to pursue, when would next season start? Would it start on time? Would there be a delay to the start of next season, regardless if this season is canceled or not? We're going to have to wait and see. But if this season happens to resume, there is a great chance that next season would be delayed until the end of this year or even to the beginning of next year. Even if the NBA and the NHL decide to cancel the remaining of this season, would we see their next seasons start when they usually do? We would have to wait and see, but there is still the possibility that they would delay their seasons and have them start at a later time, towards the end of this year or even at the beginning of next year. Those are some of the million-dollar questions that some of these leagues have to answer. Also, what about Major League Baseball? They're supposed to be in season right now, but they haven't been able to start their season. When can they start their season? What day are they hoping they can start their season? How long are they willing to push back the start of the season until they come to the decision if there could be a 2020 season? Is there a particular date if the season is delayed to a certain point later this year that Major League Baseball is just going to have to cancel the 2020 season? We're going to have to wait and see. But a league like Major League Baseball definitely has a lot of questions that need to be answered, especially in regards to how far are they willing to delay the start of the 2020 season. And if it gets to a certain point in the year at a particular date, is that when they're going to make the decision to just cancel the 2020 season? Or if they happen to be able to play a 2020 season, how long is it going to be? What would the season look like? How would it be formatted? there's a lot of questions that need a lot of answers. Even with the NFL, even though they're in the off season, the coronavirus has still affected the NFL, especially with their off-season programs, especially with free agency, the NFL draft. It's going to affect the off-season programs like OTAs, mini camp, potentially training camp. It could even affect the start of the 2020 season. So just because there's leagues that are supposed to be playing right now, or even leagues that are in their off season, the coronavirus has affected every league and every sporting event, but especially the main leagues. Also with sporting events, they have questions as well, even if it's just a one-day event or it's an event that takes place over the course of a few days. Some questions they may have is, how long do they have to postpone the event? Can it be made up at a later date this year? Will they just have to cancel the event for 2020? Can they postpone the event to later this year or even to next year? Regardless if it's a league or just a sporting event, everyone in the sports world has a lot of unanswered questions and a lot of million-dollar questions that need to be answered. Also, another debate that's going to come up: when are fans going to be allowed back into stadiums and arenas, regardless of what league or sporting event it is? That's also another million-dollar question that would need to be answered. And as of right now, regardless of what league or sporting event could happen to play sometime in the next few weeks and either resume or start their season, we're not going to see fans in stadiums or arenas. And who knows when's going to be the next time you're going to see fans in stadiums or arenas. Could it be in the next few months, later this year, at the end of this year, or is it going to be next year? We're going to have to wait and see. But a lot of leagues and sporting events are going to have to make a very tough decision. And regardless of what decisions whatever league or sporting event has to make, we're going to see a lot of mistakes made, regardless if it's in the sports world or just in your everyday life. Regardless of who it is, what league it is, what organization it is, regardless if it's sports or it's not sports, we're going to see a lot of wrong decisions made at first. And the only way anyone's going to be able to learn from the wrong decisions made is by making wrong decisions. And you can learn from those mistakes. And then when the second round comes, then you can finally make the right decision. And you're going to see a lot of wrong decisions made at first. But once people learn from those mistakes, when it's time for the next round, then they're going to have a better idea of how to answer these questions by making the right decisions. You always have to learn from mistakes in order to make the right decisions going into the future. Another reason why leagues and sporting events either want to resume or start their season is because everyone wants to get paid, regardless of who they are. It can be players, coaches, personnel within an organization or a league. Everyone wants to earn their salary. And everyone also has bills that need to be paid. And everyone needs to make money so they can continue making their life. And believe me, regardless of who it is, no one's going to not want to be making money in some shape or form for the next few months. Regardless of what league or sporting event it is, the players especially, and the rest of the organizations, are going to want to either resume or start a season so they can make some type of salary, even though a lot of players, coaches, personnel, and organizations are going to see a big decline in the type of salary they're going to make this year. And they're definitely going to see a decline in the type of salary and money they're going to earn for this year. So regardless of what situation it is, everyone's going to want to make some money, regardless of how much it is. But everyone's going to want some money. Another $1 million question is, what happens if leagues in sporting events resume or start their season, and you have an individual within a team or organization, specifically a player, a coach, or a personnel that happens to get the coronavirus? That is one of the main questions that would have to be answered if an individual happened to get the coronavirus. And if someone did happen to get the coronavirus, would the season have to stop and be canceled? What would happen to the rest of the team that individual's on, regardless if it's a player, coach, or personnel that happened to get the coronavirus? The individual that would happen to get the coronavirus would have to self-quarantine for 14 days. But what happens to the rest of the team? Would they have to self-quarantine? Would they have to get tested to make sure they don't have the coronavirus? What would happen to the other team if that team was playing another team? What would happen to the rest of the league? That's just a bunch of questions that would have to be answered, and no one really has the answer to that if an individual in a league or a sporting event happened to get the coronavirus. But regardless of all those $1 million questions that have to be answered, everyone's hoping that at some point in the next few weeks or in the next few months, regardless of what league or sporting event it is, everyone wants to see sports return back. And we're already starting to see sports return back in other countries, especially in Korea with Korea baseball. But we haven't really seen sports return back in the US. And we're waiting for that day, regardless of what league or sporting event it is. But we want to see sports return back here in the US at some point. Now, for every country around the world, it's really going to come down to a case-by-case basis. And depending on the type of case that each country has in regards to the coronavirus, it's going to come down to the coronavirus pandemic and how it's affecting that country at that time period. And that is going to determine when sports returns back to that country, but also when life gets back to normal for that country. We're definitely a few weeks and even a few months away from when life can get back to normal, and even when sports can return. But at some point, regardless of what league or sporting event it is, but especially here in the US, people want to see sports return. No matter what shape or form it comes in, everyone wants to see sports return. But everyone knows that when sports returns, it's definitely going to be different. And if any league or sporting event can start or resume a season, there's no doubt that their 2020 season is definitely going to be different compared to previous seasons or even future seasons. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens in regards to the coronavirus pandemic that's taking place around the world right now. And we're also going to have to wait and see when sports returns back. But we're hoping sports returns back sometime in the next few weeks. Right now I'm going to take a commercial break. When I come back, I will talk about the NFL. Welcome back to All Sports with Gerardo. Moving on now to NFL football. On Thursday, May 7, the NFL released the 2020 schedule for all 32 teams. Right now I'm going to talk about the 2020 NFL schedule, and I'm also going to give you a preview of the 2020 NFL schedule. So to start off, here is the 2020 schedule for the Broncos. In the preseason, they go against the 49ers and the Bears here in Denver, and they go against the Rams and the Cardinals on the road. For the regular season, in week 1, the Broncos go against the Titans here in Denver on Monday Night Football. In week 2, the Broncos are at the Steelers. In week 3, the Broncos go against the Buccaneers here in Denver. In week 4, the Broncos are at the Jets on Thursday Night Football. In week 5, the Broncos are at the Patriots. In week 6, the Broncos go against the Dolphins here in Denver. In week 7, the Broncos go against the Chiefs here in Denver. Week 8 is the Broncos bye week. In week 9, the Broncos are at the Falcons. In week 10, the Broncos are at the Raiders. In week 11, the Broncos go against the Chargers here in Denver. In week 12, the Broncos go against the Saints here in Denver. In week 13, the Broncos are at the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football. In week 14, the Broncos are at the Panthers. In week 15, the Broncos go against the Bills here in Denver. In week 16, the Broncos are at the Chargers. And in week 17, the Broncos go against the Raiders here in Denver. So that is the 2020 schedule for the Broncos, and that is all the teams the Broncos go against during the preseason and during the regular season for the 2020 season. We're going to have to wait and see how the Broncos play during the 2020 season, but there's no doubt that this season for the Broncos and the future is definitely going to be exciting for the young, talented Broncos, especially the young, talented offense and the elite defense. So we're going to have to wait and see how the Broncos play in 2020, but they should definitely be an exciting team, especially with the young, talented offense, but also because of how the Broncos were able to improve their team this offseason during free agency and during the draft, both on offense and defense. And there's no doubt that after the way the Broncos have improved their team on both sides of the football this offseason, they should be a much better team in 2020 and going into the future, especially with the young, talented offense. So there's no doubt that big things are coming towards the Broncos' way in 2020 and going into the future. And we're going to have to wait and see if they can live up to the hype. But I would say that the Broncos are going to be a better team in 2020 and going into the future. The Broncos should also win more games, have a better record. They should also play a lot better on offense and defense in 2020. And we could also see the Broncos be a playoff team. And we're just going to have to wait and see how the Broncos play this season. But regardless if it's the Broncos or the other 31 NFL teams, I am definitely looking forward to the 2020 season. And we're going to see a lot of changes in the 2020 season, regardless of what it is. If it's in regards to the coronavirus, if it happens to affect the NFL season, we're going to see a lot of changes on and off the field. But also, we're going to see a lot of changes with a lot of football teams across the NFL. And you're definitely going to see a lot of changes on and off the field and behind the scenes in the NFL. You're going to see a lot of changes with most of the NFL teams and even with all 32 NFL teams. There are definitely a few teams you definitely want to keep your eye on in 2020, especially the teams that are going to have new faces and new players playing on their team, which will be players they acquired during free agency and even players that they drafted. There will definitely be a few teams that you want to keep your eye on, regardless if it's a team that upgraded or a team that lost a lot of great players. So regardless of what team it is, you definitely want to keep an eye on certain teams across the NFL, but you also want to keep an eye out on how this 2020 season will proceed and how it's going to be played and formatted. In the 2020 season, starting this season and going forward, but especially this season, you're going to see a lot of changes happening in the NFL, on the field, off the field, and even behind the scenes throughout the league. So to start off, right now I'm going to give you a preview of the 2020 NFL schedule. And later on in the next few months, before the 2020 season begins, regardless if it starts on time and it starts when it's supposed to like it does every other season, or even if this season gets delayed because it's affected by the coronavirus, but right before the 2020 season begins, regardless of when it begins, I will give you predictions of what could possibly happen in the NFL this season, and I will also give you predictions of what's going to happen with certain teams that have new faces playing on their team, and I'm also going to give you predictions about certain teams and the type of season they may have this season. So make sure to watch out for those NFL previews for all 32 teams before the start of the 2020 NFL season in the next few months. But as of right now, I'm going to tell you and give you a preview of the 2020 NFL schedule, and I'm also going to give you the highlights of the 2020 NFL schedule. So to start off, for the Thanksgiving games this year, it will be the Texans versus the Lions, the Redskins versus the Cowboys, and the Ravens versus the Steelers. For the international games, there are no international games this season because of the coronavirus, and the NFL is hoping that they can continue the international games in 2021 in London and in Mexico City. So the games that were supposed to be the international games that were supposed to happen in London and Mexico City, whoever was the home team for those games will now host those games at their stadium in their city for the 2020 season. And hopefully the NFL can play international games in 2021. Also, in 2020, we got new NFL stadiums opening. In 2020, two new NFL stadiums will open in Las Vegas and in Los Angeles. Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, which will be the home of the Las Vegas Raiders after the Raiders relocated from Oakland to Las Vegas after the 2019 season. SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles, which will be the home of the Rams and the Chargers. So in 2020, we're going to see two new NFL stadiums open, and we're also going to see teams that relocated to another city finally have a new stadium to play in. And after the Raiders relocated from Oakland to Las Vegas, now the Raiders will be called the Las Vegas Raiders, so make sure to get used to saying the Las Vegas Raiders. It's definitely going to be something new. And the Raiders are going to have a new stadium in Las Vegas, which will be Allegiant Stadium. Also, a few years ago, both the Rams and the Chargers relocated from the previous city they played in, and they relocated to Los Angeles. And for the last few years, both the Rams and the Chargers have been waiting for SoFi Stadium to be built and to open. And both the Rams and the Chargers had to play at a temporary stadium as they were waiting for the new stadium to be built and to open. So in 2020, now that the Rams and the Chargers have been in Los Angeles for the last few years, they will finally have their own stadium, and they will finally have a new stadium to play in. Both the Rams and the Chargers will be sharing SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles, and the Rams and the Chargers are going to be like the Giants and the Jets in New York. They're going to be the second pair of NFL teams that share the same stadium in one city. So both the Rams and the Chargers are looking forward to their new stadium, sharing the stadium, and playing in a new stadium, and they're definitely looking forward to SoFi Stadium. The Raiders' home opener at Allegiant Stadium is Week 2 versus the Saints on Sunday Night Football. The Rams' home opener at SoFi Stadium is Week 1 versus the Cowboys on Sunday Night Football. The Chargers' home opener at SoFi Stadium is Week 2 versus the Chiefs. So if you get the opportunity and you like to see different stadiums, regardless of what league it is, even if you're not a fan of these teams and even if you don't follow the NFL, I highly recommend that you check out Allegiant Stadium, which will be the home of the Las Vegas Raiders in Las Vegas. And you also got to check out SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles, which will be the home of the Los Angeles Rams and Chargers. So make sure, if you get the opportunity, that you check out these two new NFL stadiums that are opening in 2020. They're definitely going to be nice stadiums, and they're also going to be stadiums, by the way that they're designed, they're going to be stadiums that you've never seen before. And they're definitely going to be new, modernized stadiums. And they're definitely going to be nice stadiums. And you definitely want to check them out if you get the opportunity. So taking a look at the primetime games, on Thursday Night Football, for Week 2, we got the Bengals versus the Browns. For Week 3, we got the Dolphins versus the Jaguars. For Week 4, we got the Broncos versus the Jets. For Week 5, we got the Buccaneers versus the Bears. For Week 6, we got the Chiefs versus the Bills. For Week 7, we got the Giants versus the Eagles. For Week 8, we got the Falcons versus the Panthers. For Week 9, we got the Packers versus the 49ers. For Week 10, we got the Colts versus the Titans. For Week 11, we got the Cardinals versus the Seahawks. For Week 13, we got the Cowboys versus the Ravens. For Week 14, we got the Patriots versus the Rams. And for Week 15, we got the Chargers versus the Raiders. For Sunday Night Football, for Week 1, we got the Cowboys versus the Rams. For Week 2, we got the Patriots versus the Seahawks. For Week 3, we got the Packers versus the Saints. For Week 4, we got the Eagles versus the 49ers. For Week 5, we got the Vikings versus the Seahawks. For Week 6, we got the Rams versus the 49ers. For Week 7, we got the Buccaneers versus the Raiders. For Week 8, we got the Cowboys versus the Eagles. For Week 9, we got the Saints versus the Buccaneers. For Week 10, we got the Ravens versus the Patriots. For Week 11, we got the Chiefs versus the Raiders. For Week 12, we got the Bears versus the Packers. For Week 13, we got the Broncos versus the Chiefs. For Week 14, we got the Steelers versus the Bills. For Week 15, we got the 49ers versus the Cowboys. And for Week 16, we got the Titans versus the Packers. For Monday Night Football, for Week 1, we got the Steelers versus the Giants and the Titans versus the Broncos. For Week 2, we got the Saints versus the Raiders. For Week 3, we got the Chiefs versus the Ravens. For Week 4, we got the Falcons versus the Packers. For Week 5, we got the Chargers versus the Saints. For Week 6, we got the Cardinals versus the Cowboys. For Week 7, we got the Bears versus the Rams. For Week 8, we got the Buccaneers versus the Giants. For Week 9, we got the Patriots versus the Jets. For Week 10, we got the Vikings versus the Bears. For Week 11, we got the Rams versus the Buccaneers. For Week 12, we got the Seahawks versus the Eagles. For Week 13, we got the Bills versus the 49ers. For Week 14, we got the Ravens versus the Browns. For Week 15, we got the Steelers versus the Bengals. And for Week 16, we got the Bills versus the Patriots. As of right now, this is the 2020 NFL schedule, but it is subject to change because of the coronavirus. Depending on the coronavirus later this year, that will determine if the 2020 NFL season will be affected or not affected by the virus. If the NFL season is affected by the coronavirus, then there could be a possible delay to the start of the season, and there could also be an alternative schedule if the NFL season is affected by the virus. We will have to wait and see what happens over the next few months in regards to the coronavirus. But if the coronavirus happens to affect or not affect the 2020 NFL season, there will definitely be updates in regards to how the coronavirus will or will not affect the 2020 NFL season. And when there's updates about the 2020 NFL season in regards to the coronavirus, or even if it's not about the coronavirus, there will definitely be updates, and I will also make sure to update you with any new updates about the 2020 NFL season, if it's in regards to the coronavirus or it's not in regards to the coronavirus. The NFL players voted to approve the proposed CBA. This gives the NFL 10 more years of labor peace. Players get an increased share of revenue, former players added benefits, and the league will expand the regular season and the playoff field. In the approved CBA through 2030, the changes you will see starting in the 2020 season includes a 14-team playoff, which includes 7 teams from the AFC and the NFC. The number 1 seed in both conferences will have a bye week for wildcard weekend, and there will be a 7th seed in both conferences. There will be a 17-game regular season starting in 2021 and ending in 2023, and there will be an increased game day active roster from 46 to 48 players, which includes a offensive lineman. So starting in the 2020 season, you're going to start to see changes in the NFL, especially during the season, starting this season and going forward for the next 10 seasons through 2030. The two major changes you are going to see is that there will be a 17-game regular season, but also starting this season, you're going to see the playoffs expand from 12 teams to 14 teams. So that's almost half of the NFL teams have a chance at making it into the playoffs and potentially reaching and winning the Super Bowl. That's a pretty good ratio for all 32 teams in the NFL, that almost half the teams have a chance at making it into the playoffs and potentially winning the Super Bowl. The change that you will see in the playoffs is that before, the number 1 and 2 seed in the AFC and NFC had a bye week during Wild Card Weekend. Well, starting this season, only the number 1 seed is going to have a bye week on Wild Card Weekend. And the rest of the seeds, from seed 2 to 7, will be playing on Wild Card Weekend. And the number 1 seed will have a bye week on Wild Card Weekend, and they will also wait to see who their opponent is when they play on the divisional weekend. Also, another change you're going to see is that there will be a 7th seed in the AFC and NFC, and instead of 2 wildcard teams like there's always been, now there's going to be 3 wildcard teams. And the playoff format's still going to remain the same, that the lower seed goes against the higher seed, and whoever's the higher seed will have home field advantage up until the time they get eliminated or potentially reach the Super Bowl. But the major change you're going to see is that there's going to be another playoff team and there will be another wildcard team. And now there will be 7 teams from the AFC and NFC that will make the playoffs, and now you'll have 14 teams in the NFL make the playoffs from both conferences. So it's definitely going to be exciting to see that there's another seed, another wild card team, and there's also going to be more teams that have a chance at making it into the playoffs, since there's another playoff spot. So teams that barely missed the playoffs and missed the cut will now have another opportunity in sliding in to that 7th seed to make it into the playoffs, both in the AFC and the NFC. So I'm definitely looking forward to that change in the playoffs, and also having a 17-game regular season starting in 2021. But starting this season, especially if this season is affected or it's not affected by the coronavirus, you're going to start to see a lot of changes in the NFL. Regardless if it's about the coronavirus or it's not about the coronavirus. But you're definitely going to see a lot of changes to the NFL season this season, starting in 2020 and going forward, with different things, regardless of what it is, and regardless if it's on the field, off the field, or behind the scenes. But the NFL is trying to be more entertaining, and they're trying to attract more fans, regardless of what team you root for, or even if you're a fan of the NFL. The NFL is trying to find another way to grab more viewers. And by adding a 17-game regular season, and by adding more teams that have a chance at making it into the playoffs, since another seed is being added, and more playoff teams are being added by having a chance at making it into the playoffs, since there will be another seed and more teams can make the playoffs. The NFL is trying to find a way to bring more viewers and to increase the amount of viewers. And starting in 2020 is when you're going to see the changes, especially in the NFL season. And now that we're in 2020, it's great to see that there's changes taking place in the NFL. And it's about time that we start to see changes happening in the NFL and even in other leagues. Because all leagues, regardless of what league it is, are in competition on the amount of viewers they get, but also they're in competition of how they can attract more viewers. And by making different types of changes, or changes like the NFL, that is how they're going to increase the amount of viewers. So we're going to have to wait and see how successful these changes are in the NFL starting in 2020 and going forward. But it's definitely going to be exciting to see some new changes happening in the NFL, but especially in regards to the NFL season starting in 2020. Right now I'm going to take a commercial break. When I come back, I will talk about the end of the show. Welcome back to All Sports with Gerardo. Moving on now, on the next show, I will talk about the coronavirus, NFL football, and NBA basketball. I hope you all have a great week. Tune in to the next All Sports with Gerardo show next week. I want to say thank you to everybody that listens to All Sports. Subscribe or like my pages on social media at All Sports with Gerardo. Until next time, this is Gerardo.